What is at stake with personal diversity? Once we conceive of the social agent as a character that has intuitively developed as a means of managing human predictability and thus cooperation between humans, once we conceive of the social agent as but one character or set of characters of many that can be run by the human being, how we wish to manage human character suddenly becomes a question open to collective discourse, rather than an invisible habit that blindly regulates itself. The management of human character, that is, the management of human behavioral predictability, reveals itself then as yet another dimension across which social dynamics play out, potentially as critical in its deterministic power as a choice of political system or the infrastructure of a city. The way in which human character is understood and managed directly shapes social discourse and interactions, precisely because human character has evolved to be a communicative interface between human beings. To be clear, the issue I raise here is not a matter of whether or not we should manage human character variability. Human character variability is already being managed, regulated, controlled. In the discussion on frame switching in section 4.1, we saw how authenticity functions as an aesthetic property that manages and promotes character consistency in human beings through social punishment and reward. The question, rather, is whether human character variability should continue to be managed blindly, based on unexamined assumptions about the mechanics of self, or consciously, based on a study of the mechanics of self and a collective discourse that enables greater participation in our own social reality. A more general question concerns the way in which we might choose to organize our relationships between the social and the individual in the future. Do our modern technologies and new theoretical models of self enable us to cope with an alternative, perhaps more variable, fluid, or complex social agent? Currently, social agents must still strive concertedly towards self-coherency and consistency. Can that change? And is it desirable for that to change? Let us imagine that sufficient importance has been attached to this problem of the management of human character variability that a group of us human beings begin together in an imaginary market square. Let it be a virtual market square on a Minecraft server to accommodate the fantasy of the democratic agora alongside the realities of globalization. A concerned citizen of Minecraft's Athens pipes up with a question she wishes to bring to the group. Hey guys, do you think that it is correct to assume that there is an essential trade-off between personal diversity and social complexity? What I mean is, in order to cooperate with other human beings, in order to be of use to you and for you to be of use to me, to get food, shelter, companionship, fulfillment, in order for us all to have access to these things, do I necessarily have to exhibit myself as a coherent social agent with a single unified character? Do I need to simplify myself in order to be legible to you? Uneasy murmuring breaks out amongst the crowd until a voice from the back rises over the rest and says, "Look, sister, I appreciate the dream of extending the individual's powers of self-expression through a cultivation of personal diversity. I really do. But that's just not the way of the world. If you want diversity on one level, you'll need to sacrifice it on another. That means if you want a diverse, responsive social system, food delivered to your door within minutes, green jobs to tackle the impending threat of climate change, or all the world's poetry, things need to be simpler and more streamlined on the granular level. That means you and me. We can either be expressive as individuals at the expense of social complexity, or expressive as a society at the expense of personal complexity. Take your pick." Hang on, interjects another member of the public. who happens to be wearing a choice magenta outfit complete with a sparkling cape. Don't be so fatalistic. You're forgetting where we are. Look around you, look at yourself. If the world of online gaming has taught us anything about ourselves, it's that personal diversity can be cultivated with the use of new technologies. Perhaps we can use virtual avatars to support the potential of our personal diversity. While the trade-off you're talking about may have been a necessary solution in the past, a solution we landed on through the trial and error of cultural evolution, this may no longer be the only way to think about the organization of human character. Perhaps we can develop technologies, and perhaps such technologies already exist, which may enable us as a society to cope with greater personal diversity without harming our capacities to organize at higher levels. Here I see my cue to jump into the conversation, and so, with a swish of my avatar's foxtail, I say, maybe so, but it would take more than technological innovation for that to work. We would also need changes to happen in aesthetics. It would have to be possible to see personal diversity enact itself in public without the stigma of duplicity or inauthenticity attached to it. Who knows? Maybe those Hollywood heroes that stick to their slogans no matter what will one day be replaced by protagonists who try out a number of different characters in the space of the film. Maybe such plurality and changeability will one day be something people nod approvingly at. Such a communal dialogue as this imaginary one would be, of course, only the beginning of a politics of human character variability. But arriving even at the possibility of this conversation would not have been possible without a disciplined study of the mechanics of self. Just as sticking to a flat earth model without ever considering alternative shapes would leave one trapped in the endless debate of, is the world finite or infinite? Through an estrangement of the status quo, the performance practice presented in this thesis provides one way of sensitizing viewers to the a priori assumptions that guide our understanding of the mechanics of self, thus providing the reader with a means of questioning them. We have traced one particular prevalent assumption about the mechanics of self throughout the dissertation and the performance practice. The idea that human character is, and/or should be, singular and consistent. The adoption of different models, such as the distributed person, or the human being as a character-playing machine, allow us to speculate on some of the implications of distinguishing between, as opposed to equating, the social agent and the human being, along various legal, political, and social frameworks. Here are some such questions on which, in future work, we can speculate. 1. Human rights. Given the distinction between the social agent and the human being, to whom exactly do human rights laws apply? For example, the United Kingdom's Human Rights Act of 1998 and other laws pertaining to the category natural person. Do they apply to the social agent or the human being? And does it make a difference? 2. Self-branding. When it comes to the management of my character within my own career as an artist, should I follow the professional advice I am often given and segregate my art audiences, or ensure that I do not tell anyone in the art world that I'm writing a novel, since the allusion to myself as a writer might damage my singular perception as a visual artist? While the freedom of artistic interdisciplinarity seems to be desired, the frequency of this type of advice indicates that there is a cost to character inconsistency in professional life too, whereby its management is known as branding. To give another example of this, consistency in the character expressed and beliefs professed by politicians is widely read as a virtue. This is evidenced by the fact that it is rare, during a prime ministerial or presidential campaign, to hear a candidate deviate from a singular, narrow line of address in their public appearances, and conversely, in the way in which inconsistency often features as a principal and effective line of attack from the opposing party. We could then look at this social mechanism of encouraging and sanctioning and thus regulating the behavior of politicians and ask how the measure of consistency as a mark of virtue might be desirable or detrimental to our politics and social life. We could ask questions such as, is the consistent behavior of my political representative a measure of how much I can trust them to stick to their pledges? Or alternatively, do I wish my political representative to be unable to change their mind about important issues? 3. Positionality. When we speak of positionality, does this refer to the position of the human being or the social agent? It would appear that positionality and the politics surrounding it relates only to the social agent, as mentioned parenthetically in Linda Alcoff's essay on the ethics of speaking from certain locations. She writes, "A speaker's location, which I take here to refer to their social location or social identity, has an epistemically significant impact on that speaker's claims and can serve either to authorize or disauthorize one's speech," end quote. The specification here is telling as it signals some remainder after the speaker's social location is taken into account, although this is not discussed further in this particular text. How else can an individual be identified besides their social positionality? Is the way in which we might locate the position of the social agent different to how we might locate that of the human being? Like the discerning needle of precision science, which leads Benjamin Libet in search of a point for the origin of volition in section 2.1, perhaps position leads us prematurely in search of a coordinate plane as the organizing principle between the human and the social. 4. Social diversity. In recent years, it has become increasingly important to talk about social diversity in our governments, our workplaces, and our schools. What is usually meant by this is the desire to create communities in which its members are as socially diverse as possible in terms of such categories as gender, ethnicity, class, or ability, since these categories have historically stratified people and organized them into unjust power relations. Therefore, diversity is nowadays called for the sake of inclusivity, that is, to avoid the injustices of the past by giving equal chances to all, regardless of social position. Some businesses have also caught on with this trend, campaigning for the promotion of diversity in the workplace, arguing that it allows a business to cater more accurately to their consumer base since their employees are more representative of their customers, the more diverse they are. For example, according to this logic, having women in the workplace gives insight into women consumers. More fundamentally, perhaps, diversity among people in various communities could be said to be desirable for the same reason diversity is desirable in ecology. A species with a more diverse gene pool has a better chance of surviving overall, because at least some of its members will be equipped to weather unexpected challenges, allowing the species to survive, even if not all its members. Likewise, a species with a less diverse gene pool is more susceptible to extinction, since its members are more likely to be wiped out by the same threat. Translating this to human communities, diversity in individuals provides the community as a whole with more perspectives, knowledges, and traditions with which to weather the unprecedented challenges we are currently facing, from climate change to the technological singularity, as well as those we have not yet identified. So as a side note here, when you're dealing specifically with unprecedented challenges the human species has not faced before, not in the precise form we're seeing them today, then it's unlikely that any previous solutions our species has come up with will be successful at mitigating these new kinds of challenges. So when it comes to unprecedented challenges where we need entirely novel solutions, you could argue that diversity becomes especially important because we need to combine our collective traditions and knowledges and specialisms to come up with entirely novel kinds of solutions we haven't had before. So diversity is particularly important in society when it comes to unprecedented challenges. The current picture of social positionality assumes that each person in the community occupies a position in the space of possible social agents, in which the coordinates are given by dimensions such as gender, ethnicity, class, or ability. Any position has its own privileged views and its own blindnesses. You cannot see everything from any one position, and it is hoped that communal diversity would help make up for individual blindnesses. While the fixed, unchanging, and essential value of social positionality may be ascribed to a social agent within a given point of time, this coordinate view of positionality is, however, not necessarily applicable to the human being, precisely because it is a being of potential, not of essence. Thus, within public discussions so far, concerns about diversity currently stop at the level of the social agent and do not extend to the human being. Societies and communities can be considered more or less diverse, but not human beings, which seems at odds with the ample evidence we have of the fluidity and flexibility in a human being's capacity to run character. People's bodies, speech, beliefs, opinions, and behaviors can and do change throughout a lifetime or within a day, depending on who they are interacting with or on the mood of the historical moment. The current predominant model of social diversity presumes that it can be attained and is desirable within a community of social agents, but that diversity does not extend as far as to apply to the human beings that compose that community. Is there reason to believe that considering diversity at the level of the individual human being may have similar benefits to the cultivation of diversity at the level of a community? And do these two levels correlate? Following Dennett's assertion that we will have to devise and agree upon systems of government and law that are not hostage to false myths about human nature, I argue that any effort to demythologize the mechanics of self can be understood as part of an attempt to make it more difficult to weaponize such myths, for example, in the service of justifying violence against groups based on essentialist claims about their identity. Character is a powerful thing. In the past few years alone, the attribution of character has saved biospheres, as in the recent granting of legal personhood to a number of natural features in ecosystems around the world, and human lives, as in cases where natural threats have been given a name. You can see the little stories about that in the footnote. What is at stake in the mechanics of self and its attendant aesthetics, which govern our everyday relation to it, is how we authenticate agency, personhood, and selfhood, whether in humans, machines, animals, or natural phenomena, as well as how we manage and instrumentalize the assumed purity and clean-cut categorizations of identity, which form the basis of much political debate today.